What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. The road to predict all 136 FBS level college football teams this summer is now taking us into Cincinnati, Ohio, where the Cincinnati Bearcats are the final team that we will be previewing out of the Big 12 conference. It's crazy that we're already getting to the end of these Power 4 conferences. My name is Nate Pope, otherwise known as Tailgate Nate, and I want to thank you all so much for clicking on this video and for helping to support the channel. If you would like to support the channel even further, please then do what it says right below me. Hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, you might as well ring the bell. Turning on notifications will ensure that you don't miss an upload during prediction season, and you especially don't want to miss one of your favorite teams. I am a sports media graduate delving into the professional world of the industry, and if you would like to see all the cool stuff I get to do in the industry while still being up to date what goes on this very YouTube channel, then please go follow me on any social media platform. It's at TailgateNate29. You can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever your preference for the platform, and Instagram, and you can even email me, tailgatenate29@gmail.com. I want to thank you all so much for supporting and interacting with me or the channel, whether you do both, whether you do either, doesn't matter to me. I really appreciate it in whatever way you may be supporting me. And now with all that said, let us talk about Scott Satterfield and the Cincinnati Bearcats this season. And there is some great optimism that this is the Cincinnati team that can finally break into a bowl game this upcoming season. But will they fall victim to the chaos that envelops the Big 12 conference? Somebody has to, and to me, the Cincinnati team is probably the most likely team to do it. However, we will dive into that and my thoughts here in just a little bit. First, I got to tell you how we do things around here. We got to go through a roster overview. Offense over here to the left, defense over here to the right. And at the end of the video, we are going to dive on in to the Cincinnati football schedule. I'll give it a game-by-game preview and prediction. And this video overall is here to tell all of you what I think about the Bearcats in 2025. Now, before we do get started, we need to look right down below me at returning production numbers. They are according to ESPN, factoring transfer portal additions up to a certain percentage. What's more, you look at the recruiting and transfer portal ranks for the class of 2025. They are according to 24/7 Sports. With all the business stuff out of the way, now we turn it over to the offense, where your offensive coordinator, Brad Glenn, is going to be taking control of this offensive unit that sees a return at the back position. Brendan Sorsby is going to be a returning player for the Cincinnati team this year. Last year, 2,813 yards, 18 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions on 64% completion percentage. Not bad production out of Brendan Sorsby last year. It really overall was a great season for him last year, and there is improvement to be expected this upcoming season. He has finally found a home here with Cincinnati, and now returning, I don't think 3,000 yards is out of the question. I think he's definitely got to increase that touchdown production. Maybe you'd like to see 25 touchdowns out of Brendan Sorsby this year. 7 interceptions, okay, you're pretty fine with that. They're going to happen there from time to time, but this is a kid in Brendan Sorsby I think showed he's really talented last year, and I think showed that, honestly, that throughout some parts, it's not that he left a lot to be desired out on the football field. Maybe at some points you could argue that, but to me, with a kid like Brendan Sorsby and a player like Brendan Sorsby, I more so think it is that, not that he left some to be desired, but I think he showed that he has more to give. And he has better intangibles and more talent that he can show out on the football field. And I think you're going to see him progress as a passer this season. And I think you're going to see him increase in production this upcoming year as well. I really like Brendan Sorsby, and I like the fact he is back to lead this offensive unit for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Your leading rusher does leave, however. That's Corey Kiner, 1,153 yards and 4 touchdowns a season ago. However, you do return most other of your running backs, including a good rusher out of the quarterback position in Brendan Sorsby, 447 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns for the quarterback last year. So you throw that into Brendan Sorsby's game as well. I think he's going to be quite the task to be able to slow down for Big 12 defenses this season. You do transfer in Taylee Walker. He's going to be coming over, I believe, from Oklahoma. No, he's coming over from Wisconsin last year. He is formerly of the Oklahoma Sooners, obviously, but he is transferring over from Wisconsin. He had 864 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns a season ago, and then 513 yards and 7 touchdowns the season prior to that. I don't know if it overall is an upgrade from Corey Kiner. I think in talent, it might be a little bit, but we'll see if the production could be matched out of Tawee Walker. Obviously, Wisconsin liked him enough to pick him up. I think he's going to be a pretty solid back here with the Cincinnati team. Evan Pryor, former Ohio State Buckeye, is also returning, had 418 yards and 6 touchdowns on 7.5 yards per carry. They only gave him 56 touches. I'd find it hard to believe if that number does not go up this upcoming season. Your wide receiver room, however, is going to be revamped. You do lose a lot of pieces out of this wide receiver room. Xavier Henderson is gone, 738 yards and 4 touchdowns. Has been a very, very good wide receiver throughout his collegiate career in the past 2 seasons with the Cincinnati Bearcats. You take a look at who else is gone. You are going to be losing Tony Johnson, who was your 3rd overall leading receiver, but did have a team high in touchdown receptions with 6. Also losing Jamoy Mays, who is staying in city, but now he's with the NFL team in Cincinnati, and some more guys that I could list off there as well. When you take a look at who does come in, well, 5 transfers are going to be trying to fill the need in this wide receiver room. Jeff Caldwell, he's over from the FCS Lindenwood. Caleb Goody, he's over from Colorado State, posted nearly 450 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. Not bad out of Caleb Goody. Cyrus Allen, really like him coming in here at Texas A&M last year, 269 yards and a touchdown. But with Louisiana Tech the year prior, 778 yards and 4 touchdowns. I love that production for the Cincinnati team. Isaiah Johnson is over from Western Carolina, and Noah Jennings is over from Charleston Southern. Now, you do get Cale Woodburn and some other returners coming in, but they are all underclassmen level players, and you bring in only upperclassmen, that's juniors and seniors, with this transfer portal class. So I like that a lot for the Cincinnati team, and I do think the wide receiver room, even though it's getting revamped, will prove to be a very effective bunch for Brendan Sorsby to be able to use. Your lead tight end in Joe Royer, however, does come back, so that's a nice return in the pass-catching department. He was the team's 2nd leading receiver last year, also 2nd in catches, 50 of them, 522 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns last year, and a 2nd former Buckeye, as Joe Royer was, in Patrick Gerd, is going to be set to join him as that 2 deep in the tight end room. Now, Gerd did not have much of a receiving aspect at Ohio State. He was used mainly as a blocker out of the tight end formation. I think you could see the same thing here with Mr. Patrick, but this is an opportunity here for Gerd to show what he can do out of the wide receiving department and being able to catch some footballs this year. Offensively on the offensive line, I don't know why I said offensively on the offensive line, that made no sense. On the offensive line, returners and newcomers are going to join and file in for an offensive unit that honestly was pretty solid last year, and it can build from that success this season. 19 sacks last year. You probably want to get that number down. They did help this rushing attack to 5.2 yards per carry. Great. Let's keep that up. You still got a lot of talent back there. But up on the offensive line, it's mainly returners. You do get some transfers coming in that at very least will provide some good depth. But I think it could be another good offensive line unit for the Bearcats this season, even while you do lose some nice pieces. Defensively, let's move on over here to Tyson Vate's defense. Sack production. I think that's the biggest thing I can push with this Cincinnati team. It's got to get better. Only 21 sacks last year. I would love to see that improve for the Cincinnati defense because I think it's going to help them go a long way. The overall unit can also force some more negative plays. They only forced 14 turnovers last year, and especially in that secondary, only 5 interceptions of production. The secondary overall can get better, being able to defend the pass, not allowing so many big plays. And again, Cincinnati, it wasn't just the sacks, generate some more tackles for loss. Get those negative plays, get those momentum shifting plays. I think that'll help them out a lot. Just generate the big moments defensively, I think is what this Bearcat defense was missing as a whole last season. You take a look at your the defensive line room, though, your top 2 sack lead, or I should say you take a look at your front 7 as a whole here, as I have sometimes combined them. I do right here. Top 2 sack leaders in your lead tackling linebacker in Jared Bartlett. He is going to be gone. He is, where I should say, was your leading tackler last year. 69 tackles, 7.5 sacks to pair with 3 passes defended. And you do lose your sack leader on the defensive front as well in Eric Phillips. He is gone off the team as well. Those are 2 massive blows. Phillips, I believe, has utilized college eligibility, and Jared Bartlett is now a New York Jet. However, when you take a look at what does come back, the defensive fronts. You got one of the most fearsome and I think one of the best interior defensive linemen in the entire country at your nose tackle position, and Dante Corleone. The dude is a monster and is definitely a guy to watch this upcoming season. Corleone last year did generate 3.5 sacks. I am of the mind that I think he can double that from the nose tackle position, which would be amazing. 7 sacks as a defensive, or I say as an interior defensive lineman. That's pretty darn good. I think Dante Corleone is a wrecking ball, and he is going to make fits. He is going to force fits for opposing offensive lines this year, just like he did last year. Transfers are coming in around him as some fortitude with some good returning pieces. Hey, don't get me wrong. Rob Jackson is going to be coming back. That's an experience piece. Micah Coleman is back. That's a good experience piece. And some good young talent, but getting CJ McCray to come flank on the other defensive end, had 21 tackles, 3.5 sacks in 2023, as well as Jalen White McLean, who's coming over from Old Dominion, 41 tackles a season ago to be a backup defensive end. May even see some starting time depending on the rotation. Yeah, not too shabby there as well. As far as the linebacking unit goes, Jake Golday is going to be coming back. Redshirt senior, former transfer, is now in this program. Played well last year. 58 tackles, sack and a half, 2 passes defended for him last season. Really like Jake Golday. And I do overall like this linebacking unit. Now, it does not get an influx of transfers. It is going to be a pretty similar unit from last year outside of Jared Bartlett, because you also do get back Jack Dingle, as well as Jonathan Thompson, and some good young pieces, especially true sophomores, that'll sit back in this 2 deep in the linebacking unit. Defensive back-wise, you do lose a ton of true defensive backs. Your secondary does get gutted. Now, that could be a good thing depending on how you look at it, because you could say, oh, well, they didn't force that many interceptions last year. Let's bring some new faces in. When you lose experience and guys that have been in the system, especially in today's age of college football, that is a massive blow. Now, also in today's age of college football, the transfer portal can help you out a lot. And they're going to do that here. According to the ESPN stat sheet, Antoine Peak and Jaquan Sanks were both listed as linebackers last year. I did think they played a little bit of defensive back last season as well, but they will be switching to the defensive backfield full-time. Peak as a free safety, and apologies, the likes of Sanks as a nickel back. When you look at other transfers coming in, I like what they did through the portal. Christian Harrison coming over from Tennessee, where he had 20 tackles a season ago. Xavier Williams over from Middle Tennessee, not too bad of a player either. And then Matthew McDoom out of Coastal Carolina has been one of the better defensive backs in the Sun Belt for the past couple of seasons. He generated the interceptions last season with 3 of them, but has forced double-digit passes defended in each of his prior 2 years with the Chanticleers over there in Conway near Myrtle Beach. 11 last year and 10 the year prior to that. So you are getting a dynamite stick in Matthew McDoom to play corner for you that I think is going to be a really nice piece to this Cincinnati team, as well as some good returners and more transfers that will sit in this 2 deep. Your same punter and Max Fletcher will be coming back this season, while Steven Rusnak is going to be taking over as your kicker. It will be a different place kicker this year for Cincinnati. Had to show love to special teams. Kickers are people too. Already talked to you about the offense, so when I talked to you about the defense, you got some absolute wrecking balls in each phase of this defense. Dante Corleone, again, I love him. I like him a lot. Jake Golday, I like him a lot. You get Matthew McDoom coming over from the portal, and those, of course, two linebacker safety mixes to now be full-time defensive backs this upcoming year, and Peak and Sanks as returners to this program. I do like the Cincinnati makeup a lot. I do like this roster a lot. I think the wide receiver room, even though it's revamped, is going to be solid, and I do think you can see some overall improvement from a lot of pieces this season. However, like I've said, sometimes in college football, there are teams that you like the build and makeup of, like I do here with Cincinnati, that could fall victim to just the chaos and the pure insanity that we see out of the Big 12 Conference. And it is a pretty difficult schedule, if you ask me. It does have a lot of games that are pretty navigable and games that I think Cincinnati can win. But overall, I take a look at this schedule and I think, man, that is going to be a tough road. As you could look at any Big 12 schedule and be able to say that about. You do have a tough non-conference game coming up week 1 of the season as well. But let's turn your attention to the numbers down below me. Odds courtesy of FanDuel. Not me telling you to go place your money, just providing some context to how good the odds makers think Cincinnati's going to be this year. 2,900 odds to win the conference is actually one of the better numbers compared to some of the Big 12 teams we have discussed lately over the past couple of weeks on the channel, and 6.5 as that over-under win total. Vegas thinks this is the Cincinnati team that can get to a bowl game this year, and I would agree with them. This is a Cincinnati team that absolutely can reach postseason eligibility this year, but will they be able to do it? Let's find out right now. You go play Nebraska on a neutral site. I believe it's Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, year 3 under Matt Rule. Apologies for the sirens outside. I'm going to keep going, though the show must go on. This is a Nebraska team that is going to see some massive improvement this year, as many teams have in year 3 under the Matt Rule tenure. Dylan Raiola, I think, is going to get better, even though the wide receiver room has a lot of changes. I like what they did through the portal. Finally giving Emmett Johnson that main role as a running back, I think, is the right decision to make. And defensively, even though you do lose your defensive coordinator, Tony White, I think you're going to have at least one of the better secondary units in the entire country this season, and you're going to be better coached offensively with Dana Holgorsen at the helm. I think Nebraska is really talented, but Cincinnati is a unique challenge. I do think this is the Bearcat team that can give the Huskers a run for their money, but overall, I do think Nebraska is a more talented team, and I do think Cincinnati loses that game on the neutral site Thursday night in Arrowhead Stadium. However, I do think they win their next 2 games. You get a Mid-American Conference opponent against Bowling Green. They're going to be trying to build up from all they lost, but also Eddie George going to be trying to set in his culture, his foundation, what he wants this Bowling Green program to look like. Obviously, a college football legend, Eddie George, as a Heisman Trophy winning running back at Ohio State. Did a solid job with Tennessee State, and now is coming over to the FBS level to try to build up an in-state program in Bowling Green. I think it's going to work out for him eventually. I just think he's going to try to set a foundation, and you could see some moments of struggle this season, probably more so than you see some really good success while you're trying to build. Northwestern State's going to be an easy win, so we'll skip right along past that. That is a win against the FCS opponent from Louisiana. Now you dive on into the Big 12 slate, but you get a week to think about it. You get your bye week here after the first week of the season. So you do get a chance to say, okay, let's prepare for this Kansas team on the road. And look, this I do think is a winnable game for Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati can go on the road and get this one done, but I think Kansas is going to be able to pull out the win. I do think this is a Jayhawk team that is going to be much improved this upcoming season. I really do like what Kansas has, especially Jalen Daniels coming back at the quarterback position. LaShawn Williams, we've seen what he can do at Iowa. I don't think he's going to be a true one-to-one replacement for Devin Neal. Very few people can be, but LaShawn Williams, I think, will be a good piece in the running back room. And even though the wide receiver room gets revamped, I like the pieces they brought in through the portal. Defensively, though, it's always been a challenge to defend outside the numbers. And with Brendan Sorsby throwing the football, that could be a challenge here. The same thing with this matchup as well. But I do think that Jalen Daniels and this Kansas offense does enough, and the Kansas defense at home can get that one key crucial stop that will beat Cincinnati there on September 27th. October 4th at home against Iowa State. Chaos of the Big 12. Can an upset happen? I don't think so right here. I think Iowa State is a really talented team. I do like what Rocco Becht has surrounding him. He does have a lot of really good returning pieces in this running back unit. And yes, you no longer have Higgins or Noel to throw to out of the wide receiver room. Well, it could prove to be a deeper unit than usual. You get Daniel Jackson back, and Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend are guys coming in through the transfer portal. I think you have to throw them more than 2 primary guys this year for Iowa State to try to get back to a Big 12 championship game and even win the thing this year, which they fell short to Arizona State last year. However, I think this is an Iowa State team, even again with some of the defensive pieces they lose, this is going to be a really, really good defensive unit, and Iowa State's going to be one of the better teams overall that we see in the Big 12 this season. At home against Central Florida, here we go. I think Cincinnati gets back on track with a win against UCF. This is a Central Florida team, and a team back being led by Scott Frost that I think needs some major rebuilding. I don't think this program is left in the best spot after Gus Malzahn left to go take the offensive coordinator job at Florida State. I do think this is the Central Florida team that again, does have a lot of ways in which they can improve, in which they can get better. And overall, I do like a lot of the talent that Central Florida brought in through the portal, but it's about Scott Frost reestablishing himself with that program and being able to build it back up again. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's a Cincinnati program that knows this UCF program pretty well. And overall, getting UCF at home, I think is a big benefit. Compared to having to go on the road and play in the bounce house. I think Cincinnati gets that one done. They pick up the win, and they will move forward there now with 3-3 through the first 6 games. They definitely could win more than that, but I think 3-3 pretty realistic. And then you get into the back half of the schedule. You got to win 3 more. I think it's going to be a tough ask, but I think it's doable, and I think you start out on the right foot on the road against Oklahoma State. Is Oklahoma State going to have as much of a disaster of a season as they did last year? No. In fact, I think they improve in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of questions for me with the Pokes this year. Zane Flores, what is he going to be at the quarterback position, and especially can he stay healthy? What's some of the other talent that Oklahoma State is going to look like surrounding that? And is this an Oklahoma State defense that can show some signs of improvement from what it was last season? To me, there are just a lot, and honestly, too many questions for this Oklahoma State team. Even though it is a road game in Stillwater, I think Cincinnati can go on the road and get that one done. You could call it Big 12 chaos if you want, but I do think Oklahoma State picks up that loss. Cincinnati picks up that win. You're coming up against 2 teams here to round out the middle stretch of your season against Baylor and Utah, and I don't think you win either of them. Why? Well, I think Baylor is really, really talented, and I think can stretch out the Cincinnati secondary enough to be able to win this game. And Baylor is a very balanced offensive attack. They have 2 running backs that are 1,000-yard rushing threats. Sawyer Robertson at the quarterback position, I think, is spectacular. I like him a whole lot. And I do think overall, you take a look at this Baylor Bear team makeup, they're one of the sleepers in the Big 12 Conference. I would absolutely watch out for this Baylor program. I think they can be a pretty darn good unit. I like a lot of the talent they have, and I think Dave Aranda gets this team back on track after a disappointing couple of seasons. Had a good season last year. I think we'll continue that into this season. Speaking of disappointing seasons, Utah had a massive one last year, a massive disappointment that is. 5-7 is not what you're used to seeing out of Kyle Whittingham-led groups, and in what could be the final season that we see Kyle Whittingham as the head coach of the Utah Utes, in fact, maybe as a head coach in general, you are rebuilding this offensive skill position unit, wide receiver room, great. I love a lot of the pieces you brought in. Devin Dampier at the quarterback room, great. I love him, and I do think he'll fit in nicely to this system. Wayshawn Parker, Naquari Rogers, Bryce Duke, all transfers coming into the running back unit. Great. I like that a lot. And you know what Utah is going to look like defensively. I think the defense even can show signs of improvement from what it was last year. Utah will have a bounce back year, and that is a loss for Cincinnati. I also think Arizona is a loss for the Cincinnati team. Now, this is one of those 50-50 games that I could go back and forth on, and you really could convince me either way between the Wildcats and the Bearcats in this game. But I do think the Wildcats are going to come out on top, because when you compare the 2 quarterbacks, I like Noah Fafita a little bit more than I like Brendan Sorsby, and I think when you compare a lot of the position groupings, there's probably some I'd swing Cincinnati, some I'd swing with the Arizona Wildcats, but overall, I like Arizona just a little bit more, and I especially think Arizona is being criminally underrated by Big 12 fans and by even college football fans this year. I think they'll be much better than people think, and they will beat Cincinnati on the road. Even though BYU is without Jake Retzlaff, this now becomes a very winnable game for Cincinnati because of it, but BYU has still got a lot of good pieces that's going to make them very competitive in the skill position rooms and defensively. So even though the Jake Retzlaff situation is a big whole mess, I do think BYU is going to be competitive enough to win a lot of games this year and honestly be a top half team in the Big 12 Conference, Jake Retzlaff or no Jake Retzlaff. On the road against TCU, I do think you'll lose this one as well. Josh Hoover in this dynamic passing attack, good luck being able to slow it down, and it's a TCU defense that can see some steps in the right direction this year as well. Overall, I do have 4-8 for Cincinnati, and while I think probably more realistically, you probably do get a 5th win somewhere on the schedule. Cincinnati is that team to me that you look at the end of the year and say, man, that was a disappointing season. There's always one in the Big 12, if not multiple, and I do think Cincinnati just not going to go their way this year. I do like a lot of the pieces that are here. I do. But sometimes teams fall to the chaos in their conference. Cincinnati will fall to that in the Big 12. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and let me know what you guys think, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.